My name is Kathleen Maddox. I'm 36 years old. And this is the story of how I found out my husband was stripping for his mistress at her bachelorette party, and how I walked in with her fiancé, holding the proof that destroyed them both. It was a Thursday night in Austin, Texas. I had flour on my face and almond extract on my fingertips. The kitchen smelled like nutmeg and sugar as I stood over a hot stove, preparing a fresh batch of cookies for my husband Colin's company mixer. He'd told me it was a last-minute networking event at one of the partners' homes, something casual but important. I didn't question it. After 12 years of marriage, you learn to let the little things go. Or at least I did. I was scraping the last of the cookie dough into perfect round drops on the baking tray when a soft chime rang out from the iPad sitting near the blender. I glanced over absently. Just a notification. Probably another grocery promo or recipe app. But something about the subject line made my skin prickle. Sienna marketing project. Tonight's going to be wild. Thanks for the surprise dancer. My eyes narrowed. I tapped the screen, smudging it slightly with flour as I opened the message. My heart stopped. The sender, Sienna Brooks. Colin's new assistant. I barely remembered her. Just a glimpse at the last Christmas party, a sparkly red dress, a laugh too loud, a hand that lingered on Colin's arm for a second too long. I'd chalked it up to office friendliness. But now, I saw the truth unfold like a nightmare in slow motion. Scroll after scroll, texts filled with emojis, champagne glasses, sly references to the Crescent Resort and secret boyfriend of the year. There were photos. One of Colin standing in front of a hotel room, grinning, shirt unbuttoned. Another of a champagne bottle with a note that read to S&C, forever starts now. My hands trembled. I clicked the attachments tab. Receipts. Hotel bills. Dinner charges from places Colin had sworn were client meetings or solo strategy sessions. One in Denver. Another in Miami. A particularly expensive one labeled room service, Aria Hotel. That trip, he'd told me, was for a media pitch. He'd kissed me goodbye that morning with the same lips he probably used to whisper lies into her ear. But what broke me wasn't the deception. It was the message that followed. After my bachelorette, let's sneak away for a few days. I can't wait to start our real life. Real life? While I was in our real kitchen, baking cookies for a fake event? The air felt thick and sour. I stumbled back from the counter, the paring knife still in my hand, forgotten. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat down on the cold tile floor and leaned against the fridge, the glowing iPad still clutched in my lap. The clock read 8:27 p.m. If the message was right, the party was happening now. A bachelorette celebration. For Sienna. With Colin as the surprise dancer. The same man who once blushed when I joked about pole dancing classes. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand, stood, and walked to the bedroom. No makeup. No perfume. I pulled on old jeans, a black hoodie, and twisted my hair into a bun. Not for disguise, this wasn't a costume. This was the real me. The one Colin clearly hadn't cared to know anymore. As I pulled out my phone, something snapped into place. A thought. A name. Sienna's fiancé. I'd seen him once, in a tagged photo on social media, Ben Carter. A tall man with soft brown eyes, holding Sienna on a beach. The caption said, counting down to forever. Forever was about 18 days away. I typed his name into Instagram, then into LinkedIn. A few clicks later, I had his company profile and, more importantly, his email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but my mind was clear. If I was going to blow this open, it wasn't going to be from the shadows. I typed. Hi, Ben. My name is Kathleen Maddox. I know this message is unexpected, but I believe you have a right to know. I'm the wife of Colin Maddox, the man who has been involved with your fiancé, Sienna Brooks, for several months. I have messages, receipts, photos, and evidence that tonight, your bachelor party isn't the only one happening. Colin is currently performing at her Bachelorette. If you'd like to talk, I'm willing to share everything. I pressed send. 12 minutes later, my phone rang. Ben's voice on the other end was calm at first. Too calm. But as I walked him through everything, Colin's fake trips, the texts, the Crescent Resort, his breath caught. We booked our wedding there, he said quietly. I hesitated. Her party is tonight. Fairmont Hotel by the river. Colin's the surprise. If you want the truth, if you want to see it. I'm 15 minutes away. I'll meet you outside. I drove in silence to the Marriott where Ben and his family were staying. He was waiting in the lobby, pale as snow. Next to him stood a woman in a navy velvet dress, clutching a rosary, and a tall man with steel gray hair and an unreadable face. This is my mother, Lucille. And my father, Walter. They want to come. No one said another word. We got in the car. On the 18-minute drive, I sent Ben the screenshots. I heard the soft swiping of his thumb through betrayal. Lucille prayed silently, her beads clicking softly. Walter didn't blink. As we approached the hotel, Walter finally asked in a quiet, gravel voice, "Do you know what you want out of tonight?" I looked at the rearview mirror. The truth. Not drama. Not revenge. Just truth. Lucille nodded slowly. Sometimes truth alone is enough to destroy everything built on lies. We pulled up to the Fairmont. Outside, glittery heels clicked across marble floors, laughter echoed from behind ballroom doors, and a sign in pink and gold declared, Bachelorette Bash, bride-to-be, Sienna Brooks. I turned to Ben. You ready? He nodded. Let's end this. I pushed the ballroom door open. The music crashed to a halt mid-bass drop. Laughter stopped. Glasses froze in midair. Every head turned. Under the tacky strobe lights, in the middle of a ring of women wearing sequins and feathered tiaras, stood Colin. Shirtless. One side of his tearaway pants already ripped open. A black bow tie dangled loosely around his neck. His expression went from performative confidence to full-body paralysis the moment our eyes met. For a split second, time froze. And then Sienna turned. She was standing in front of him, her glass raised in celebration, and when she saw Ben, her fiancé, beside me, her face drained of every trace of blood. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. The silence was so complete, the sound was like a gunshot. Lucille was the first to speak. Her voice was sharp as a razor. What are you doing, Sienna? Sienna opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her lips trembled, her eyes darted between Ben, me, and Colin. Then, she tried, Ben, I can explain. Ben didn't move toward her. He simply lifted his phone and held it up. On the screen, the messages. The photos. The Crescent Resort receipt. My entire digital folder of betrayal, out in the open. Murmurs rippled through the room like a wave of shame. A bridesmaid in a seafoam green dress stammered, "Is this real? What is going on?" I stepped forward. I didn't look at Colin. I didn't need to. I had stared at that man for 12 years. I knew what shame looked like on him. But I'd never seen fear until tonight. Instead, I faced Sienna. You've been sleeping with my husband for 8 months. You lied to your fiancé. And tonight, you hired my husband, to strip at your bachelorette party. Gasps cut the air like knives. Sienna choked, I didn't plan. You planned everything, I said. The messages. The secret vacations. The condo you're co-financing with my husband under a fake LLC. The wedding venue that was supposed to be meaningful to your family? You used it to cover your affair. Do you even care about the man standing next to me? Colin tried to speak. I turned on him before he could. I have the receipts. Hotel bills. Flights. Photos from Chicago, Denver, Miami. Do you remember March 16th of last year? He blinked, confused. Your mom's birthday? I nodded. And the day my brother flew in for the first time in 4 years. You said you were stuck in Houston. Flight delay. But really, you were in Post Oak at a Hilton, room 1732. Registered under C. Maddox and S. Brooks. I kept the receipt, not knowing what it meant. But now I do. Colin's jaw clenched. I pulled out my phone again, opened a message he sent to Sienna just 2 days ago. After the wedding, things will be easier. She doesn't suspect anything. We'll figure it out like we planned. I showed it to the room. Ben stepped forward, his voice low but steady. I picked out your dad's tuxedo. I booked the honeymoon suite. I built everything for us, and you're standing here with someone else's husband? Sienna's mouth trembled. Her mascara ran in streaks. Ben, please. But Ben wasn't listening anymore. Walter Carter, silent until now, crossed his arms. You shamed your family. You shamed ours. Our relatives fly in next week for a wedding that no longer exists. Do you understand what you've done? Lucille turned to her son. Ben, you don't need to marry into this. You don't need to carry someone else's shame. Sienna crumpled onto a chair. She looked small, broken. But no one moved to comfort her. I faced Colin one final time. You said I was controlling. That I suffocated you. And I believed it. I believed I had failed as a wife. But now, I see what you were doing. You weren't suffocated. You were hiding. Colin looked at the floor. I continued, my voice quieter now, but stronger. Last week, I met with an attorney. Every joint asset we had? Moved to a temporary trust under protected spousal rights. The only property still in both names was used, by you, as collateral for that condo. Sienna flinched. I pulled out a navy blue folder and placed it on the buffet table beside Sienna's shattered glass and Ben's discarded engagement ring. Inside is the civil freeze on our joint accounts. A list of all financial transfers made under Madsen Creatives, LLC. And the divorce petition. Unsigned, but ready. Colin gasped like he'd been struck. At that exact moment, the door flew open again. In walked a tall, sharply dressed man with a leather briefcase. He looked around the room until his eyes landed on Colin. Am I on time? He asked. Colin stumbled back. Derek? What are you doing here? The man nodded once. Yes, it's me. Derek Hall. Your co-founder. Your business partner. And now? The man delivering your termination papers. The room held its breath. Derek turned to me and gave a nod. Kathleen. Thank you for the evidence. Colin's eyes widened in horror. Derek didn't flinch. You used company funds to pay for your affair. Over $92,000 in unauthorized expenses, flights, hotels, gifts. You created fake travel records, false emails. And you involved a subordinate. Miss Brooks. Sienna gasped. You signed an ethics agreement. And violated it on nearly every page. He placed 2 cream-colored envelopes on the table. One's your immediate termination, Colin. The other is Sienna's suspension pending review. Colin sank to his knees. Literally. No one helped him up. I exhaled for the first time in hours. Derek looked at me once more. If you need corporate financials for legal purposes, I'll cooperate fully. Thank you, I said quietly. And then Derek walked out. He didn't look back. And neither did I. The silence that followed Derek's departure was suffocating. No music. No voices. Just the soft sound of tears and the rustling of dresses as some of the guests slowly began to gather their things. The party was over, and not just the Bachelorette celebration. The illusion, the lies, the perfectly curated fantasy that Sienna had built for nearly 2 years is gone. Shattered with one message. One room. One truth. I stood near the buffet table, my fingers grazing the edge of the divorce packet I'd brought with me. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was calm. Hollow, maybe, but steady. A kind of clarity you only get when there's nothing left to explain. Ben turned to Sienna. He didn't shout. He didn't even raise his voice. But what he said next cut sharper than any scream. I met you in 2020, he said softly. You were waiting tables. Finishing grad school. You told me you were tired of being seen as decoration. That you wanted to be respected. That you wanted a future. Sienna said nothing. Her mascara smeared like ink down her cheeks. I believed you, Ben went on. I supported you. I introduced you to my family. They treated you like their own. And now. I realize I didn't know you at all. She reached for him instinctively, but he stepped back. I gave you a ring, he said, his voice catching. You gave me a mask. I built a life for us. You built a story to cover your escape route. Lucille, still clutching her rosary, finally stepped forward. You lied to us, Sienna. To your parents. To your church. This wedding wasn't real. It was a stepping stone. You were going to disappear with another woman's husband. Sienna finally found her voice. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I was trying to find something better. Walter scoffed, arms still folded across his chest. By stealing it from someone else? Sienna's lips trembled. Ben, please don't abandon me. I didn't plan to fall for Colin. It just happened. Then you should have ended us first, Ben replied. Before the flowers were ordered. Before you picked out your father's tuxedo. Before you let my mom cry happy tears when she said you were the daughter she never had. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out the silver ring, and placed it back on the table. The clink it made echoed louder than the music ever had. Then came a wave. Sienna's bridesmaids, one by one, began to rise. I'm sorry, one whispered. I didn't know. Another shook her head, clutching her purse like a lifeline. I can't be part of this. They left, quietly, solemnly. No goodbyes. No hugs. Just the sound of heels and shame walking away from a wedding that would never happen. Sienna cried out. I didn't mean to lose everything. I turned to her. No, I said gently. You meant to win everything. You just didn't expect to get caught. She buried her face in her hands, but no one moved to comfort her. Not even Colin, who sat slumped in a chair like a discarded puppet, face pale and shirt still half open. Lucille took Ben's hand. Let's go, she whispered. We'll handle the vendors. Better to lose a deposit than build a life on lies. Sienna cried harder. Mom. Please. Don't leave me. Lucille didn't scream. She didn't snap. Her face held only sorrow. We're not leaving you, Sienna, she said. But we're not protecting you from this either. You'll have to live with what you did. Walter nodded. We raised you better than this. What you chose, that's on you. And with that, the Carters walked away. I followed them to the elevator, not because I wanted to leave, but because I didn't need to stay anymore. Colin didn't chase after me. He didn't even look up. He knew. It was over. 6 months later, I sat on the back porch of a small wooden house outside Flagstaff, Arizona. The sun was setting, casting golden ribbons across the hills. I cradled a chipped mug of peppermint tea, long gone cold. Birds chattered in the trees, and the scent of pine settled in the air like peace made tangible. I had sold the house in Austin 1 week after the court finalized our divorce. Colin didn't contest it. The financial evidence, the company fallout, and the backlash from friends and family left him with little strength, and even less pride. His lawyer tried to bargain, but I didn't come to negotiate. I came to reclaim my name. The new house was smaller. Older. But it felt like mine. I didn't have a smart fridge or touchscreen lights. No voice assistants. No security cameras. Just the quiet creak of old floorboards and the sound of wind slipping through pine needles. I'd started working part-time for a local nonprofit that supported women going through emotional abuse and divorce. It wasn't glamorous. No blazers or boardrooms. But every time I sat in a circle with women trying to find themselves again, I felt like I had finally arrived at the right place. Ben and I still kept in touch. We weren't dating, at least not yet. But sometimes, he'd drive up from Tucson with black coffee and used books. We'd sit on the porch and watch the sunset without saying much. And sometimes, saying nothing is the deepest form of healing. One Saturday afternoon, he brought a dog. A goofy, sneezy black Labrador from the local shelter. His name's Murphy, he said. He hates mint. Sneezes every time. Murphy sneezed on my lap that same day. I laughed so hard I cried. I'd planted tomato vines behind the kitchen, though most died in the first frost. I wasn't upset. You don't need perfection to feel rooted. You just need peace. Sometimes, when the wind howls against the windows, I dream of that night again, not the confrontation, not the betrayal, but the moment I turned to Colin and felt absolutely nothing. No pain. No rage. Just a clean break. Like tearing off an old bandage and seeing healed skin underneath. Freedom, I learned, isn't about being alone. It's about no longer letting someone else define your worth. It was late November when the official letter came. I had been expecting it for a while, an envelope from the Office of Civil Restitution, tied to the forensic audit of Colin's company. Derek Hall had kept his word. After the night at the Fairmont, he forwarded internal documents to my legal team. What none of us anticipated was how far the rot had spread. Turns out, Madsen Creatives LLC wasn't just a shell Colin used to funnel money for hotel getaways and fancy gifts. It was also the name listed on an application for a $90,000 small business relief grant during the pandemic, one he'd pocketed, even though he was still receiving full income from his actual job. Fraud. Plain and punishable. The government had opened a civil case to reclaim misappropriated funds. My attorney called it poetic justice. I called it the natural result of arrogance. I sat on my porch, reading the letter twice before folding it neatly and placing it on the table beside my tea. I didn't smile, not really. The satisfaction I felt wasn't bright and loud. It was quiet. Clean. A kind of vindication that whispered, "You did the right thing walking away." My old life had collapsed with one email notification, but what replaced it was something deeper. Something sturdier. I no longer lived under the weight of trying to convince someone to love me. I no longer second-guessed my instincts. And I never again apologized for asking questions. One morning, while organizing the last of the court paperwork, I found something. A journal. One I'd kept sporadically throughout my marriage. Mostly recipe notes and scribbled thoughts about grocery budgets and dinner party seating charts. But there was a page from 3 years ago that caught my eye. March 16th. Colin missed dinner. Said he was flying in late. I made his favorite pasta anyway. The sauce dried up waiting for him. Maybe I'm too sentimental. I stared at that entry for a long time. Back then, I blamed myself for being sensitive. For noticing too much. For feeling too deeply. I folded the journal closed and set it on the shelf, not to forget, but to remember exactly how far I'd come. Around that time, I started leading a weekly women's circle through the nonprofit. Some came bruised, others just hollow. Many whispered their stories like they were confessing sins. But I told them something I wished someone had told me. You are not hard to love. You were just taught to accept less. After one session, a woman named Darlene stayed behind. Her mascara had run a little, and her hands trembled when she touched her scarf. My husband tells me I'm crazy, she whispered. That I make everything up. That I twist things. I reached across the table and touched her hand gently. You're not crazy, I said. You're catching what they try to hide. That's not madness. That's clarity. She cried then. Not loud. Just the quiet sobs of someone finally seen. I walked home that night under the stars, a gentle breeze tugging at my coat. No one was waiting for me at the door, and for the first time in my adult life, that didn't feel like a failure. It felt like space. Space I had earned. Ben sent a message the next morning. Back in Flagstaff next weekend. Murphy insists on seeing you. And I still owe you a dinner. I replied, only if you're cooking. My idea of dinner is still toast and tea. He sent a photo of burnt lasagna. Then we're doomed. But at least we'll be hungry together. We weren't rushing anything. There was no grand declaration. Just quiet moments stacked over time. But sometimes, quiet is what saves you. One afternoon, I stood in the kitchen watching snow fall outside the window when a thought struck me. I hadn't thought about Colin in days. Not in passing. Not in pain. Not in anger. He simply, no longer occupied my mind. And I smiled. Not because I'd won. But because I was free. Weeks later, I got a call from Derek again. He wanted to meet, nothing formal, just coffee. I agreed. He was already seated at a small corner table of a quiet cafe when I arrived. Kathleen, he said warmly, standing to shake my hand. You look lighter. I smiled. That's because I'm no longer carrying a man who couldn't lift himself. We talked for an hour. About the company, the changes, the fallout. Colin had tried to start a new firm but had been blacklisted in every major client circle. His name was radioactive now. He's been laying low, Derek said. No one's heard from Sienna either. I assume she left town. I shrugged. They were always good at running. He took a sip of his espresso and leaned forward. I never told you this, but I suspected something for months. I just didn't want to believe it. Colin, he always made himself look golden on the outside. But you peeled it back. I nodded. Sometimes peeling hurts. But it's the only way to get to the rot. Derek smiled faintly. You ever think about consulting again? Your eye for detail, your discipline, you could rebuild a company in your sleep. I shook my head gently. Maybe someday. But for now, I'm right where I need to be. He respected that. As we parted ways, he handed me a slim folder. Just in case you ever need leverage, he said. Final audit findings. Including offshore transfers. Might help if Colin ever tries anything. I took it, thanked him, and slipped it into my bag. I didn't plan to use it. But knowing it existed gave me peace. That night, I stood at my back window watching the frost settle on the tomato beds. They'd long since died, brittle and blackened. But next season, I'd plant again. And maybe this time, they'd grow. Because that's what healing is, it's replanting after ruin. It's showing up every day for yourself, even when no one else does. And it's trusting that the future can bloom, even after the soil has been scorched. A few days before Christmas, I received a letter in handwriting I hadn't seen in almost a year. Colin. I turned it over in my hands 3 times before finally opening it. There was no return address, just a folded page with slightly smudged ink and the faint scent of cologne I used to recognize immediately. Kathleen. I know I have no right to write to you. I don't expect forgiveness. But the silence has been unbearable. I lost everything. The company. The condo. The respect of my colleagues. And I know I lost you long before the Fairmont. I just didn't realize it. Or I refused to admit it. I thought I was in control. I thought I could have both. But I see now that I was only running from the reflection in the mirror. You were never the problem. I was the coward. I've started counseling. I don't know if it'll help. But I'm trying. That's all I can say. I won't contact you again unless you allow it. I just wanted to say thank you. For not becoming cruel in response to my cruelty. You exposed me, but you did it with grace. And I deserved every bit of it. I hope you find someone who sees you the way I should have. Colin. I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my kitchen drawer. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because it was evidence of the ending. A record that the man who once dismantled my peace with lies had finally looked in the mirror and seen the truth. Even if it was too late. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just made a cup of coffee and went back to what I was doing, planning a holiday donation drive with the nonprofit. That year, we collected more than 200 coats, toys for over 50 families, and enough food for an entire community center. I baked 3 dozen trays of cookies, real cookies, not distraction baking like before. I even found myself humming as I worked. On Christmas Eve, Ben showed up at my door with Murphy in tow. Murphy sneezed the second I opened the door. Ben laughed. I told you, he's allergic to peppermint. And I'm allergic to loneliness. I rolled my eyes but stepped aside to let them in. We didn't exchange gifts. We didn't need to. Instead, we cooked dinner together, burned the bread, undercooked the potatoes, and laughed until our ribs hurt. Later, we sat by the fireplace. I asked him if he ever thought about her. About Sienna. Sometimes, he admitted. Not because I miss her. But because I still can't believe someone could look me in the eye and lie like that. I nodded. I used to think the same about Colin. But now I understand. Some people lie because it's easier than facing their emptiness. He looked at me then. Do you feel empty? I met his eyes. No. I feel full for the first time in years. He reached for my hand. Me too. We didn't kiss. Not yet. There was still healing in progress. But it was a beginning. A quiet one. A safe one. In January, I returned to Texas briefly, to close out the last of the legal matters. The courthouse was quiet, its halls echoing with the weight of endings. Colin didn't show. His attorney handled the filings, handed me the final document, and said simply, he's relocated. We're not sure where. I didn't need to know. I walked out into the sunlight with my coat tucked tight around my shoulders, a file folder under one arm, and peace in my chest. The wind was cold. But I was warmer than I'd been in years. Back in Arizona, spring started to tiptoe in early. Wildflowers began to bloom on the hillside behind my cabin. I cleared out the dead tomato plants and turned the soil. Planted new seeds. This time, I added basil and rosemary too. Murphy came by often. So did Ben. But now, he didn't sleep on the couch. And I didn't flinch when I heard footsteps in the house. We weren't trying to erase our pasts. We were just building something new, something honest. One night, sitting by the fire, I told him, you know what surprises me the most? What? I thought I'd feel vindicated if Colin and Sienna fell apart. But I don't care anymore. That's the real freedom. When you stop needing them to suffer in order to heal. Ben smiled. That's strength. We toasted with mugs of herbal tea. No champagne. No fireworks. Just quiet celebration for lives we finally got to claim for ourselves. And then came something unexpected. Darlene, the woman from the support circle, asked me if I would speak at an event. A women's conference in Sedona. She said they needed someone to tell a story. Not just of heartbreak, but of rising. I hesitated. But then I remembered that girl sitting on the kitchen floor last year, knife in one hand, iPad in the other, heart breaking open like a fault line. She would have wanted someone to speak. So I said yes. On the day of the event, I stood at the podium with shaky hands and a steady voice. I told the story, not as revenge, not as a dramatic tale, but as a testimony. I told them about betrayal. But more importantly, I told them about rebuilding. About porch gardens. And burnt potatoes. And dogs who sneeze at mint. And men who don't flinch when you're honest. I ended with this. Sometimes, the worst day of your life is just the start of the most honest one. The room was quiet. Then came the applause. And with it, the final piece of healing I never realized I needed. After the conference, I lingered near the back of the hall as women came up to me one by one. Some hugged me. Others cried. Most just said thank you with a look that said more than their words ever could. But one woman stood out. She was in her mid-40s, with streaks of gray in her hair and a tired, soft smile. Her name was Selena. She didn't cry. She didn't hug. She just looked me in the eye and said, "You didn't just tell your story. You told mine, too." Then she handed me a folded note and walked away. Inside was a single line. The day I left, I thought I was dying. Turns out, I was being born. I kept that note in my wallet for weeks. Every time I opened it to pay for groceries or gas or tea, I saw those words. And each time, they reminded me why I had survived, not to carry the pain, but to pass the torch. A few months later, I was asked to join the board of the nonprofit. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't a therapist. I wasn't a financial genius. But what I did have was lived experience. And a voice. So I said yes. We started expanding our programming. Legal aid. Emergency housing. Financial literacy courses for women exiting abusive or manipulative relationships. I helped create a program called Reclaim, focused specifically on recovering not just from trauma, but from identity theft of the soul. Because that's what betrayal does. It doesn't just steal your peace. It rewrites your story. Unless you take the pen back. That summer, Ben and I finally took a trip together. Not far, just a quiet weekend in New Mexico. We hiked, read books, and laughed over terrible diner food. We didn't talk about our exes. Not once. The silence wasn't avoidance. It was healing. One evening, after watching the sun dip below the Red Canyon, he turned to me and asked, "What do you think would have happened if we'd never found out? If we hadn't walked into that room that night?" I didn't even have to think about it. "I'd still be baking cookies for a man planning his exit," I said. "And you'd be married to someone planning hers." He nodded. "It's terrifying. How close we came to wasting our lives." "But we didn't," I replied. "We chose truth over comfort. That's what saved us." We didn't speak for a while after that. We didn't need to. A month later, something strange happened. An email landed in my inbox from a name I hadn't seen in almost a year. Sienna Brooks. The subject line, "I don't expect forgiveness, but..." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Kathleen. You don't owe me anything. But I wanted you to know I left Texas. I moved in with my aunt in Oregon. I started working at a women's health clinic, of all places. I've spent the last 7 months replaying everything. Not just the Bachelorette disaster, but the person I became leading up to it. I wasn't just cheating on Ben. I was cheating on myself. Pretending I was fine when I was deeply, dangerously empty. I don't expect you to ever respond. But I wanted to say thank you. Because you didn't tear me down. You didn't scream or humiliate me. You told the truth. And in doing that, you forced me to face mine. I'm still working through it. But I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. Sienna. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her. But because her apology wasn't mine to receive, it was hers to give. And it was enough. That night, I made peace with her. Quietly. Alone. No grand moment. No tearful reconciliation. Just a deep breath and the closing of a chapter. Later that fall, I got a phone call from my old neighbor in Austin. Her voice was hesitant. Kathleen. I thought you'd want to know. Colin moved back to town. I didn't feel the twist in my gut I once would have. Instead, I asked casually, "Oh? What's he doing now?" She paused. Bartending at a hotel downtown. He keeps a low profile. No one talks to him much. People remember. I nodded. Thanks for letting me know. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not exactly. Just confirmation. Life had a way of circling back. That winter, I hosted my first Christmas in Flagstaff. Nothing extravagant. Just a few neighbors, some friends from the nonprofit, and of course, Ben. He brought Murphy, a pie he didn't bake, and a small box wrapped in craft paper. Inside was a pendant. Not flashy. Not gold. Just a silver locket with a single word engraved inside. Whole. I figured you didn't need a symbol of someone else, he said. Just a reminder of who you are. I held the locket in my hand for a long time. Then I clasped it around my neck. I never knew I needed this, I said. I did, he replied. We stood by the fireplace, fire crackling, the room filled with warmth. Not just the heat. But the kind of warmth that comes when you know you've finally made it through the darkest parts of your story. Some people walk through fire and never stop burning. But some of us? We walk through it. And emerge forged. 6 months passed. The snow melted early that year, revealing a garden already sprouting signs of life, basil leaves poking through soil, tiny cherry tomato blossoms clinging to their stems, and rows of lavender swaying gently in the breeze. Life, once so still and brittle, was growing again. Quietly. Fiercely. And so was I. Every morning began with coffee brewed by hand and long walks with Murphy through pine-covered trails. Ben had officially moved to Flagstaff by then, not into my house, not yet, but close enough that his laughter echoed off the same hills I now called home. We were in no rush. Healing had taught us both the value of slow love, the kind built not on promises or grand gestures, but on consistency, trust, and silence shared in comfort. I never thought peace could be so simple. Then, one bright April afternoon, while packing up donations for the women's shelter, I received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? A deep voice replied, hesitant but clear. Is this Kathleen Maddox? Yes, I said, heart stilling. This is Marcus Kane. I'm a civil investigator with the Federal Economic Misconduct Office. We're finalizing our case regarding Colin Madsen. I understand you were married to him? I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. I was. What's this about? We're wrapping up an embezzlement and tax evasion case tied to his business. Your evidence contributed substantially to the investigation. He'll be facing a formal indictment in the coming months. We've frozen his remaining assets. There's also a victim restitution component, and as a defrauded spouse, you may be eligible. I took a slow breath. I don't need his money. No, Marcus said, his tone respectful. But you deserve what was taken from you. After I hung up, I sat on the porch for a long time, watching clouds roll lazily across the sky. I thought about the girl I used to be, the woman who waited by the oven for a man who lied about business meetings and forgot her birthday but remembered every detail about another woman's laugh. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new. Not hardened. Not bitter. Just awake. Later that week, I received the formal papers. Colin would be indicted on 5 counts of fraud and tax evasion. There was a note from Marcus attached. Your testimony wasn't just pivotal, it was brave. I didn't smile for revenge. I smiled for justice. The garden was thriving by June. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving something. I was living. Really living. Cooking without checking my phone. Sleeping without double-checking locks. Laughing without wondering if someone was laughing at me behind my back. And one Saturday morning, Ben stood in my kitchen, wearing a flour-dusted shirt and holding a crooked tray of scones. He looked nervous. I have something for you, he said, placing a small box on the counter. I opened it slowly. Inside was a simple gold ring, not an engagement ring. Not yet. But a promise. Inside, it was engraved with 2 words. No masks. I swallowed hard. It's not about forever, he said. It's about honesty. If we go forward, we do it real. No roles. No pretending. Just us. I nodded. That's all I've ever wanted. We didn't announce it. No big post. No elaborate dinner. We just moved forward, one slow, steady day at a time. One night, curled up on the porch swing under a warm quilt, I picked up my journal and wrote for the first time in weeks. Freedom isn't the absence of betrayal. It's what you choose to build after. It's refusing to let someone else's lie become your truth. It's planting tomatoes again, even after they all died the first time. They say betrayal breaks you. But maybe, if you let it, it also remakes you. Sharper. Clearer. Kinder. Stronger. I used to think revenge was about destruction. About striking back. But now, I see it differently. True revenge is building a life so whole, so peaceful, so deeply rooted in truth, that their absence feels like a gift. Thank you for listening to my story. My name is Kathleen Maddox. And I am no longer broken. I am reclaimed. Some stories are about endings. Others are about beginnings disguised as endings. Kathleen's journey is both a story of betrayal, yes, but more than that, a story of strength, of rising, of building something real after everything false has fallen away. Let this be a reminder to anyone out there. You are not too broken to begin again. And if you've ever been made to feel small, remember this: the truth doesn't just expose lies. It frees the one who finally tells it. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have done what Kathleen did? Have you ever faced a moment like hers? We'd love to hear your voice. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more true stories of betrayal, resilience, and bold transformation.